Hello, everyone. This is Noah and John. We are from UrbanDigs. We're talking Manhattan, and we got Hillel Fried here from LG Fairmont, Johnny.
Yep, looking forward to it.
And yeah, we're going to get right into it. Hillel, listen, everyone wants to know what's going on out there. All right. There's total mystery out there. Please start high level. What is happening in the markets today?
Uh, I would say there's a big misconception between what people are reading about, as you said, because of the lack of data and what actually is happening. I think that some buyers are reading about transactions, the amount of volume that dropped by 46%, but that obviously doesn't mean that prices have dropped 46%. And just in general, there is indeed a huge cloud on what actually is happening because as I just said, volume has dropped incredibly. And I do see that almost on a monthly basis, the climate is changing incredibly since, let's face it, also with COVID and around the world, it's now even changing weekly. I mean, tomorrow, some zip codes or in boroughs in Manhattan and Queens and Brooklyn are going in lockdown again. So it obviously goes hand in hand with the news that's happening.
So in this, I'm sorry, I was going to ask you, in this fluid environment, right? It's certainly a fluid environment. Are you noticing most of these changes on the buy side with your buyers? Do you have buyers that are active and all of a sudden out of nowhere, they're like, you know what, I'm just going to take it easy?
So first of all, I see it does affect buyers and sellers very much, but in obviously different ways. On the buyer side, I can tell you that just 2 weeks ago, I had buyers who were incredibly interested in a property, but they just said, we're going to wait 90 days because we do forecast that the market will be going down more. But in general, I do have to say this, there is an influx that we're seeing in transactions. On our end is obviously data that will unfold in the next few months because things that are just happening right now, accepted offers, signing contracts,
right,
things that are not visible yet. So I think people have gotten to a very interesting point. If you want to go to the historical narrative of the last 6 months, there was a beginning of COVID. People didn't know at all what was happening. Everyone anticipated prices are going to drop. And ironically, during those 3 months of the lockdown, there were some deals that went into contract, and they ironically actually didn't go into contract for such incredibly low prices. And then as we got out of the lockdown, the inventory in the market just was incredible. There was complete inflation in apartments. And that's what I think everyone started testing the water. So I would say that June, July, the end of June, July and August were relatively a bit quieter, not from our point of view as brokers. They've been very busy with going out with buyers, but without people yet pulling the trigger. They wanted to see what was going on.
And that's what the data shows. I mean, because supply, just to reiterate, supply, to put a number on it, back in late June, it was at 5,000, right when you were talking about it. And then it skyrocketed up, and we're at 9,300 right now. So, I mean, we're up about 90 some odd % over that time period that you're describing here.
It's incredible. Even like if we just take Upper West Side, I don't remember seeing so many hundreds and hundreds of condos and co-ops, one bedrooms in Upper West Side, for instance, in the longest time. So at least since I've been doing it in data that obviously I've been reading about before I started real estate. So getting into it.
What about on the sell side? What are the sellers thinking?
So sellers, I think the sellers that have gone on the market, the vast majority of sellers, I'm leaving the high-end luxury aside for a minute. The vast majority of sellers are real sellers to begin with. If you're not a real seller, there's no reason in the world to list today. So the fact that you are a real seller, I think they also had to hit that learning curve in June, July, August. And we're just seeing now more and more reductions in price, especially as winter comes in. We're reading about second lockdown starting in November. We're reading probably, I've been hearing this, I'm not a scientist, but I've been hearing it throughout different outlets, media, that in February, we're probably going to go into a third lockdown. So winter is not looking too good. And I think sellers who want to cash out, they want to move on, they need the money, they don't want to rent out their apartments, they are now actually reducing prices. And this is exactly why we're in a junction that we're just seeing now more and more actual transactions. People are actually making that leap and understanding that now's the time to lock in things. I don't think this is going to last forever.
Yeah,
I think that in the winter we are going to see this trend.
Well,
I think,
Sorry, go ahead. I just want to jump in there because I think you made some interesting points. Number one, the idea that if you're selling now, you're a real seller, and that sort of hits hard with a lot of the fact that a lot of buyers just aren't pulling the trigger for whatever reasons. The second lockdown, third lockdown, it just a number of layers of uncertainty. And I'm curious that when these two things come together and the negotiation side, like what sort of deals are you running into in terms of listing discounts, things like that? How far are these real sellers willing to go down in order to get a deal?
I'll give you a great story. There was this property listed at 2.1. They lowered it 1.8 due to COVID. We went back and forth 2-3 weeks. Again, that's to get the learning curve of the seller who already had it a bit, but he saw it live. Because again, people are not getting that many offers. So every offer, nothing is insulting. I managed to lower it down in the end to around 1.525. So it's 15% on top of what he already discounted. So in other words, we're definitely seeing, how sellers are implementing that. On the other hand, just two stories, one that is happening right now in the last 24 hours and one that happened to me 2 weeks ago. It's about 2 apartments in the Upper West Side. Sorry, one is Upper West Side, one is Upper East Side. It was dry. Nothing happened. Buyer got all excited. We went in. We even had them reduce the price suddenly. When it rains, it pours. There is an influx right now. And out of nowhere, because the seller already lowered it so much, people are then willing to pull the trigger. They're just watching. They're good hunters right now.
Yeah.
And they were willing to pull the trigger. And suddenly I'm finding myself in the midst of a pandemic needing to compete with 2-3 other offers. And suddenly it's going for roughly around ask. Wow. So it's not that it's a boiling market. The ask is obviously already very soft, but nonetheless, you have to be very careful with that notion that buyers sometimes come in where they could just, no matter what the price is, they could get that reduction. You really have to look at everything in context like you always do, but especially now.
Yeah. Right. And you know what, John, we're hearing this. We heard this from another broker that there was a deal that looked like it was in place. It looked like there was an accepted offer and then they lost it. And we just heard about that. I mean, but you tell that story, and then you told the story before of the 2-1 down the 1-5. I could imagine there's confusion. If anything, people need to understand this is a highly segmented marketplace right now, even more so with no volume, right? And a lot of this is a function of the asking price of the seller. So that 2-1 of that seller was clearly an opportunistic seller, and they were just testing the market kind of thing, as opposed to this last example, which it looks like the seller priced it kind of right. And look what happened.
Right. So it's actually, I think there were 2 extremes. The seller, in hindsight, was unrealistic. And the first example I gave, but that's because there's no data. So he thought the 2-1 based on other comps was actually right. He lowered to 1.8, but the 1.8, honestly, if I was their broker in that specific case, 1.8 sounded not too bad. But it doesn't matter. The comps keep on regenerating themselves, I would say, on a weekly basis.
Yeah, so and that's gonna lead to a lot of volatility and confusion over the next number of months, 3 to 4 or 5 months, as the rest of the COVID deals come through. Johnny,
because I think one of the, and some people have talked about this, how sort of comps have a sort of a self-reinforcing problem. As the market goes up, the comps go up, and then the next set of comps are higher. Same thing on the downside. Yep. But listen, Hillel, I think you talked about something really interesting there, and I'd like to talk about, with comps, with this lack of data, how do you talk to a seller about pricing in this market? I mean, how do you start that conversation with, guess what? you're going to have to take a cut here, and it's not what it was.
So first of all, John, thank you so much for asking that question. Basically, with sellers, we first look at prices. Definitely recent comps. I like seeing what happened a year ago at this time. I like seeing what happened just around COVID. So let's just say 6 months ago, and the trend in that specific building, if there are comps, and in the neighborhood. So, and making sure that at each stage, the reduction in price percentage-wise have come through. Because if not, or things are just our competition, not even comps, whoever we're competing with, that is almost today, I would say just as important, even if not more important than comps from 3 months ago. It's who my competition is and how long they've been on the market. So that is crucial to see where we should price it. Let's just say price per square foot. Another very interesting method that I have picked up for the last month and a half is I actually go to the prices to when they bought the property. Now, for instance, just give a few examples to make it a bit more vivid, but let's say Upper West Side, Upper East Side. One other way to check if we are in check from our current market value is that we don't price it, or it shouldn't close, I should say, for a higher price than 2014, 2015. You go to Washington Heights, it shouldn't close for more than 2016 sales. If you go to Bushwick, where it appreciated much more percentage-wise in recent years, you should roughly go back to prices around 2018, maybe the end of 2017. So that's just another way to be in check and see if that also aligns with your pricing and how the market is going. So it's ironically looking back at comps that we used to snob completely. Someone said to me, what, a year ago or 2 years ago, oh, but he paid so-and-so a few years ago. I say, that's in New York City, that's irrelevant. Now it's more relevant than ever because we are seeing trends in every neighborhood in general that the prices have been going back a certain amount of years, and it's a great way to have a checkpoint.
Yeah, I know. I like it. You know, one of the things that we like to stress when doing comps is absolutely stress relevance over recency. So if you can take something that's much more relevant now, even though it's from a market several years ago, it's just a much better comp because it does a much better job of capturing the sort of the dynamics in play. But let me shift for a second. And we didn't really talk beforehand here, but I'd like to get your thoughts on the rental market. Any color you got on the rental market or what's happening, discounts, concessions, anything there?
One word, terrible. I manage a lot of portfolios for a lot of clients of mine with a lot of property. I can tell you, contrary to, well, in general, I'm not happy when I get a vacancy from clients of mine just because, you know, I want them to succeed. Now it actually makes me sad. There's just way too many vacant apartments. And I do see across the board 20% reductions. It could be usually in free rent. Many times it's actual reduction in price. Owners are just desperate. The even bigger problem, I would say, is even when they lower those prices, there's simply not enough people to occupy all these apartments. Look today, again, if we want to give an example from Upper West Side, you're looking today at around almost 400 vacancies of one-bedroom apartments below $2,500 in the greater Upper West Side. It's unimaginable when you're looking at these numbers. It's unbelievable, and simply in obviously an array of reasons, not just jobs. It's the lack of students in universities, you know, the bread and butter of those type of apartments and that pricing in general. So it really is bad. I think, and I've seen this. You have to be a little bit more risk averse as a owner to take people that yes are qualified, but that are not that classic 40 times the rent. You're going to wait for that. You're just going to bleed for a whole year. So again, not taking just anyone, especially with the whole eviction issue and all that. So you're not stuck with someone and you have to go to court on top of having on top of not having rent paid. But nonetheless, you just have to be a bit more aggressive today if you don't want to lose money.
Yeah, you're echoing what I'm hearing. And at some point you got to think that the deals get to a level that it brings in the demand to kind of equalize.
Oh yeah.
I don't think we've reached that inflection point. I mean, you mentioned the inflection point with the sales market, which I love. Thank you for bringing that up. But I mean, John, we're looking at that rental market very closely now because they're related. And I mean, if the sales market's going to start to form a bottom and get past its volatility, we need to see the rental market start to stabilize and form a bottom and kind of start to recover. And that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we've talked about. Rentals, they just move much faster than sales. They tend to
Faster.
lead sales in terms. So if you have a lot of rental vacancies clearly, and the prices are getting cut on the rental side, it
Right.
doesn't augur well for sales. But I will say that the fact that rentals do move so fast. I mean, listen, 400 vacancies on the Upper West Side. I mean, with a change in environment, they could be filled instantly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that that could change over time.
When we go into, I guess in this case, not fire sales, but fire rentals, everything in the end can be occupied. But I mean, there's a stage where it's just like for owners, they're literally losing money, even if they're occupied, between their liability. So, and that's the main issue. So I'll just give you an example. I have a listing that we just got a year ago, $3,900 in a luxury building, a 1-bedroom in Midtown East. It's now $3,100, and it's a struggle.
Yeah. I mean, these things fall quicker than they rise when they fall. And in this environment, this is what's going to happen until it finds its way, And I mean, there's thousands of stories like that are out there. I mean, and measuring it's difficult because you got the net effective, like you said, you got the discounts and you got the concessions, which is hard to kind of track. But I want to move on. We're running out of time. Hillel, this has been really, really interesting. A nice different take. I want to ask you a couple of questions. I want to get short, quick answers from you.
Lightning round.
Okay?
Lightning round.
You're dealing with a stubborn, unrealistic seller. They want X. You think it's worth Y. Do you take the listing or not?
Yes and no. Sorry. Basically, it all depends where. I had someone, I think it's worth 420, 430. He thinks it's 550. Waste of time. On the other hand, I also have to be considerate, and I can't just expect a seller who doesn't have the experience that I have day in and day out to know what I know. And sometimes they need their learning curve. So I'm willing to take it upon myself for, let's just say, a month. And if we don't get anything, which I am usually right about, then that's when they have the learning curve. If they're still not learning from it and they're completely, adamant about it, I could say, look, at the end of the day, there's integrity here. It's just not, I'm an advisor. I'm never going to promise something I can't deliver. So in that case, it would be a waste of time. So that's
my turn. I got one. All right. Same thing, but on the buy side, you've got those buyers who are like, yeah, we totally want to buy, but we're not in a rush. It might be now, might be a year from now, 2 years from now. Do you bother with buyers who are not, quote unquote, A buyers who are hitting the accelerator?
So that's a question that I think is always right for real estate, regardless to COVID. The answer is strictly yes. I always say I'm not here for the race. I'm here for the marathon. Some people need to take their time. They need their patience. This is not a pair of shoes that they're buying. It's just going out with them or sending them updates, and slowly they get their learning curve until they're comfortable. I don't see anything wrong with it. And for people this is for first-time buyers, for people who are already bought and they're more versed in the market, they even more so, they also know what they like and what they don't like.
Yeah.
So I believe in streaming along. This is different than representing a seller.
Yeah, and those secondary buyers that buy for a second and third time, they're so easy. They do their own thing, and then when they're ready, they just bring you in, do your analysis and your consulting. I used to love that part. Okay, we're getting to the last question here. Who is more unrealistic, Hillel? Who is more unrealistic, buyers or sellers?
Buyers.
Buyers are more unrealistic. Buyers think the market's down 20%. It's really only down 10%.
Exactly, because sometimes you see there are a little bit of sellers who are unrealistic. And they then have to drop the prices so much. And then the other buyers see that and say, wait, I'm only getting 7%. I want the 15, 20%. But they're not looking in context of how they priced it to begin with. So it's very easy to spoil this amazing momentum in this market And that's where buyers sometimes get way over themselves. And as I started before, they're reading all this data, but it's not in context. Just because volume drops 46%, it doesn't mean prices are dropping 46%, as we all know.
I
That
love
would
it.
be a disaster.
Great answer. Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic 20 minutes. Thank you so much. That is Hillel Fried. He's from LG Fairmont. That is John Walkup. I am Noah Rosenblatt. We are from UrbanDigs and Talking Manhattan, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
All right, Hillel, thank you very much.